Okay, so I just wanted to put this up here now. This is just me being a jerk. So this will probably piss you off a little bit, but it needs to be told. True story. All my life. So I'm at work one day and I get a patient into my room, and on the, like, we can see it on the computer screen, the diagnosis, before the patient actually, before we go in there and see the patient. So I see a lady with her head wrapped up, walks back to the room or whatever, and I look on the thing like, oh god, why is this lady here? Seriously, it says, no lie, it says weave too tight. And I was like, weave too tight? And so of course, you know, a couple white people ran up to me like, oh my god, did you see the lady they put in your room? You see her diagnosis? What's that? Weave too tight? What is that? You gotta tell me, you gotta tell me. So I'm like, I don't know, I'm about to go find out. So I go in the room. I'm like, hey, how are you? What brings you in today? I work in an emergency department. So I'm like, so what brings you in today? And she was like, well, I had to go to a wedding, but like last week I had to go to a wedding, so I decided to get my hair done, and I had this weave put in. And when I had the weave put in, I told her that it was too tight, but I was like, you know what? I paid too much money, and I got this wedding to go to, so I'm gonna go to this wedding, so I left it in. And she was like, and I left it in, and then the next day I just got this terrible headache, this horrible, horrible headache, and I was like, I gotta take care of this, but I just had so much stuff, because I guess it was her son that was getting married. I said so much stuff going on, and I just couldn't take it out right then, so I just waited a few days. She was like, then it started getting hard, so then I went to see my doctor, and I guess they took the weave down, and they cut it. I think they cut the actual, it turned into a knot in the back of her head, and they cut it, you know, with a scalpel. And she left. She came back to us because the pain in her head was getting worse, and the knot was still hard, even though they cut it. And so, I was like, okay. I just left it at that. Like, normally, as a good nurse, you would take her hand and stick back there and you would touch it and you would assess her and stuff, but she was kind of freaking me out, and I just didn't really know what was going on, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna tell the doctor. And I told the doctor was like, her weave's too tight? And he was like, okay. So he went in there to go see the patient, came out, and he was like, did you touch her head? And I was like, no. And he was like, touch her head. Go and touch her head. I was like, alright, like I said, should anyways to put in my assessment. I go back in there and touch her head, and literally, my hand did this. Like this. You see this whole spot? It was hard, crusty, sticking out of the back of her head. Like there. I could cup it like a baseball. I was like, huh! So what are we gonna do? And then he says, it's an abscess. It's an abscess that developed from her weave being too tight. He's actually going to call surgery. It was the middle of the night. He's going to call a surgeon, to get up out of his bed, to come down to the hospital, and to cut this lady's head open. Now, mind you, I wanted to see what it looked like once her head got cut open. Just because this on your head to be cut open, that's really large. I can't even understand. Anyways, so I didn't stand there the whole time, but I was pretty grossed out. He actually, when the surgeon cut it open, he took a Q-tip, a long Q-tip, like this long, like one of those Q-tips that we use to pack wounds. He took one of those Q-tips and began probing the inside of her head. It went in, tunneled underneath the skin, around the incision, at least as long as my finger, not to mention that creamy, white, nasty, disgusting pus was spilling out of her head, mixed with blood down the side of her neck. Was she black? What do you think? Of course she was. What woman would wear a weave for a wedding and then it would be just too tight? Don't get me wrong, white women wear weaves, but a lot of times what they do is they have the weaves that they fuse to their hair here, so that way they can, that's why you see Kim Kardashian and all of them with their weaves and they put their hands in it. That's because it's fused here. Black women tend to braid it and put it in here. So I have some friends that wear weaves, and we were kind of thinking it might have been something going on with that hair, because I understand the weave being too tight and maybe even causing some of your skin to die, but the abscess must have been a combination of the weave being too tight and actually cutting into the scalp, with the weave also being dirty. Had to have been. Or her hair, maybe she just didn't wash her hair well, because I know a lot of people of African American descent, we don't wash our hair often when we get perms, because a lot of times it'll fall out. So that's just one of the many reasons why somebody like me with natural hair might encourage somebody who wears a weave not to wear one, because I've had patients who've come in with weaves being too tight, and it caused them to have a surgeon come in and cut an abscess out of their head, and they had to stay in the hospital overnight and receive IV antibiotics. That's a great reason not to get a weave. But I'm sure most people will compensate by saying, you know what, I'll just never make it that tight. Good. I hope that's a great response. It's a great response until it's not, and you find yourself in the hospital. Well, then I guess the moral of the story is don't wear weaves, or when you put your weave in, make sure that it's clean and make sure that it's not tight. That's why.